It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays. And this Wellness Wednesday, I'm not sure how this is going to go. It's a little new version, but this is something that happened on the Discord server. And it ended kind of cool. And it made me think, this wasn't so hard. But it's about listening to understand, as opposed to listening to respond or listening to react. And it happened to be about one of the controversies surrounding Dragon Age Veilguard. And it was an example of people not agreeing, but instead of just shutting each other down, we talked about it and came to a thing of, well, okay, here we go. So let me do the help support this channel and then we'll get into it. Help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Veilguard's been coming up a lot in Leanna Care sessions. But so the whole idea of non-binary characters in a fantasy world with a fantasy race whose, worldview is not ours. And the question of, does Veilguard handle it well? And there are two basic camps. One is that, well, it's being shoved down our throat. I do think it's sort of awkward that, the top surgery scars was very much its own thing, as opposed to being incorporated into the scar, options. And then the fact that there's that particular type of surgical scarring, but not, say, mastectomy scarring or single reduction scarring, which some people do have, appendectomy scars, or hernia surgery, anything like that. If there's going to be inclusion so that people can represent themselves in a game with magic, inclusion has to be inclusive. And yes, they have to draw the line somewhere, but there's a lot of people who have, top surgery that are cisgender people. And yes, it's not the same thing, but if we're doing a body acceptance thing, scars are scars. I know I have a giant appendectomy scar because it ruptured and I got gangrene. And I was really self-conscious about it when I was younger. And I ended up doing like a chainmail bikini photo shoot where I wouldn't let them remove, like Photoshop the scar out. And that was my way of owning it. And if somebody wants to do that in a video game, I think that's great. But the minute you start including, the things you don't include become very glaring. And so it's sort of, they can only do so much. However, it's fair to talk about additional things that could be included so people can see themselves in game. And I say this as someone who no longer needs to make a character that physically looks like me. I like to make characters that are more fun looking. I mean, I based my entire Veilguard character around the really awesome curly hair. The only thing I tried to make vaguely similar to me in real life was the eyes, because I have weird eyes and I wanted to see how close the character creator could get. Not bad. But with the reference to a non-binary person, I said, the thing I have is the language. Thetis is a place where people literally get possessed by spirits that are emotional state of being. What the heck's his name? The guy who, Spite, is the demon with him. He is literally a binary. Anders was a binary. These are binary people. So non-binary would mean something very different in this world. They should have come up with another term. And different cultures would have different names for it. The way sort of, the Bishonen character and trope in Japanese media is unique to that. Or, different cultures have different tropes, have different ways of sorting people. The same way, indigenous people have the two-spirit designation that is strictly indigenous. Where was that in the world building? And everybody, no matter what side they were on before, but yeah, that's it. And that was able to happen, that consensus, because we let people talk and we let people have their opinions, and we push back. I mean, we push back pretty hard against each other on that server, but we don't say, you're not allowed to talk about this. The only thing we don't allow is sort of violence, and that's just because the world is real right now. So we don't, we're more quick on telling people to watch the violent jokes and, comments about wanting to hurt people and things like that. Even though we know they're being hyperbolic, we just want to be respectful of everyone, but we don't shut down entire topics. We've come very close sometimes, but we've said, guys, if this conversation isn't handled in a different way, we're going to have to shut down discussion of this, and we don't want to do that. So please work with us. And, to people's credit, either they do or, they leave the server, and that's cool. If they don't like what we're doing, they don't have to stay. There are plenty of other Discord servers that let you shitpost and, do other things that we don't do. That's why there's multiple servers. That's the great thing about Discord, is you don't like one, go find another. But we do try to be inclusive, truly inclusive, meaning people wanted to talk about International Men's Day. We had a discussion about International Men's Day. I did content on International Men's Day. We didn't, and as I said at the time, this whole idea about whether we need it or not, that's ridiculous. Do we need an International Pancake Day? No, we don't, right? An International Cheese Day. This is not necessary. Cheese Day is not a human right. And I like my cheeses. Some cheeses. I gotta be careful. I can't eat too much cheese. But fresh Parmesan, man, that's good. Like, not the grated crap. Like flaked, fresh, stuff of the gods. So good. Halloumi. I really like too. Halloumi cheese. But yeah. I just got derailed on cheese, but do we need an International Cheese Day or an International Flowers Day? No, we don't. International Tulip Day. Do we need this? No, we absolutely do not. So why are we applying a higher standard to something like International Men's Day, right? And this is what I try to do. I try to take someone's perspective, even if I don't agree with them. There is a big difference between challenging someone and shutting them down. And I also call people when they're using shutdown tactics. And that can get a little tough because some people use shutdown tactics and they don't realize they're shutdown tactics. There was one recently where someone said, agree to disagree. And that is something I don't accept because it's not true. You can't agree to disagree on the other person's behalf, right? If you go, can we agree to disagree on this, and the other person agrees, well, that's agreement. But if you just say, agree to disagree, no, there's no agreement there. That's unilateral. You just shut the other person down. I don't want to talk about this anymore. So just say, I don't want to talk about this anymore. That is honest. It isn't this nice game thing of, no, there's no agreement there. I didn't consent to disagree. I'm not okay leaving it there, right? Like that, just be honest about it. But people are like, it's just a turn of phrase. Yes, but words mean things. And I have heard from so many people lately who have been hurt by generalizations. The one that I've been hearing a lot, maybe because it was International Men's Day, were women just going, why do men do this to a man who doesn't do that particular behavior? And what they've been told is they're supposed to understand, well, if you're in the room, they're not talking about you, but they are a man. So literally they are part of group man, meaning they are talking about them. And if that person's autistic, that's a real challenge for them to parse, instead of me watching and adapting it to, why do some men do this? Or do you know why some guys do this? Right? Just being more considerate of the people in your orbit, instead of making them do all the work to keep the social peace. That's not fair to ask certain people to do a lot more heavy lifting just because where you come from, these heuristics are normal. If you want people to feel comfortable in your space, everybody has to give a little, right? Everybody has to make certain adjustments. Well, another funny thing on the Discord server is because there's so many North Americans that are not, let's call them USians, because there's like, I'm in Canada, Eileen's in Mexico, there's, and so when we say America, that's North America. So sometimes it is like an America-wide phenomenon, right? If we're talking about, say, well, we'll see how long the Canada-US-Mexico agreement lasts now, but whatever. That's the Americas, right? But if it's just America, we'll say USian. So it's clear, right? Because there are some things that are also very, like, Canada and the US share certain cultural things. So then I'll say Canada and the US, but that's something we design that's our own vocabulary, so for clarity, right? And it takes a while for some new people to catch on. Even I didn't quite understand what the term meant but this is the thing, we talk, right? And if you're coming at things from the perspective of everybody is doing this in good faith, then you can be open to this other perspective, and it's better for everybody. We can have a discussion about non-binary people in fantasy world building instead of, is this game woke? Which is an argument of definition, and I'm so not interested in it. I know some people care very much, but there's two fights there, right? And this, again, is what I got from actually listening to people. There's one group of people that are just woke. Not interesting to me. You're entitled to your opinion. It's just not interesting to me. I'm allowed to think that. But there's other people that feel gaslit by the idea that there have been no changes to that franchise over the years. And it's undeniable that there have been changes to that franchise. You know how Gears of War Judgment feels different from the other Gears of War games? Because People Can Fly did that one instead of, the Epic team specifically, and then Gears 4 and 5 felt different because that was the Coalition. That wasn't Cliffy B. Sorry, Cliff Blazinski. We're not supposed to call him Cliffy B anymore. Sorry, Cliff. But obviously there are different takes on it, and some longtime BioWare people were fired right after their work on Veilguard, but David Gator's not there. It's the first purely post David Gator game. Of course it's going to feel different, right? Of course. Like this idea that there have been no changes. Arlathan became Arlathon. That's a change. And again, we live in an age where literally means figuratively. So people going, nothing changed. And that meant nothing of significance in their opinion changed. But like, to me, the one that really bothers me is Kunari went from being a religion to a race. And there are definitely changes. Now, are these ideological changes, or is this just a new team going, we find this too confusing, it's our franchise now, we're going to retcon this? I think it's more the latter. Just, this is confusing, it's ours now, we're going to retcon this. And I'm not sure I love that, but some things happen. I mean, Arcane is so far divorced from League of Legends right now that it's not even worth talking about. I've stopped trying to track everything. It's just like, I'm gonna like League of Legends for the goofy, coolly designed, silly thing it is, and then Arcane is its own thing. That's my way of dealing with it. Other people are going to have more trouble making the transition, though. Arcane isn't one that I've heard too many people complaining about. The Witcher was harder for a lot of people. Rings of Power is the one that I really struggle with. I'm constantly behind on Rings of Power because I'll watch 2 episodes and just be so, I don't get it. And then I'm like, I can't do anymore. And then I forget, and it's all sadness. There is no joy. And I keep trying. It's like Sandman. I don't think I'm going to watch season 2. In that one, the things that they did change were odd to me, and I think didn't make it better. And then the things that they kept, it's like, I would have been okay with you changing this. But this is a matter of taste, right? I am never going to deny an IP holder's right to do whatever they want with the IP, including Neil Gaiman, even though he's a creepy bastard. And I think self-adapt at your own peril. It's very, very hard to not be too close to something when you're going from something you wrote as a comic book with a particular purpose in the 1990s versus a TV show. Now, you're a different person, you hope, right? It's good to get a pair of fresh eyes on it. But he can do what he wants. It's his IP, right? I accept that. The Dr. Seuss estate can do whatever they want with their books. It's their IP, right? Roald Dahl's family can apologize as much as they want. Great. It's their IP. IP holders have the right to do whatever they want with the IP. Now, I can say whether I think it works or not. And that keeps things in scope. I'm not going, when someone starts saying, well, it's this, well, it's that, well, it's representation, I won't say, I may say whether it's woke is uninteresting to me. Someone can try to persuade me that it's interesting. It might work, it might not. But right now I find it because it's all about, is this X as opposed to how does this work? And I think coming into it from a position where I don't have to be right, or I don't have to have the only right opinion, or more accurately, my opinion is not the only valid one. Why? Precisely because it's an opinion. Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. Some of them stink. But we can all have our opinion. When it's a work of fiction, there's less right or wrong and more, this is my perspective, this is my perspective. And if you listen to the different perspectives, that to me is where the joy of being a part of a fandom is. To find out why people like certain characters. I'm still listening about why Harding is so popular. I don't get it. But people insist that later on in Veilguard, they really get into it, and I will understand. And it's like, not everybody's going to have the same favorite character, right? I'm pleasantly surprised by how fun a lot of the characters are, like over the top fun, right? Like big personalities. That is a nice return to the Origins Dragon Age 2 form, especially Origins. The characters are all kind of goofy the way they were in Origin. That makes me happy. But the world building, yeah, it's kind of a mess. Does that mean the game's bad? No, my hat's off to the BioWare developers. They got forced to develop it as a live service game or something like that. And then they had to smack it back into single player, and you see the vestiges of the original version. And that's why anybody that says there haven't been changes to, the Dragon Age franchise over the years, that's just factually inaccurate, right? They only had like 18 months to make Dragon Age 2, so they rushed it, but Origins and Dragon Age 2 are the ones that are the closest, even though even then there are some differences. The dialogue wheel being the biggest one. I don't like the dialogue wheel. Discussion for another time. But Inquisition was definitely a shift. Be more like Skyrim. That was a change, right? And a lot of people who don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the ability to separate like theme versus that kind of design stuff, they're going to respond to changes and maybe misidentify it, but gaslighting them by claiming there have been no changes. That's not fair to them. Right. There have clearly been changes. I mean, we went from a party roster of 4 to now it's 3. Change, right? We didn't have the dialogue wheel in Origin. I preferred it that way. I actually said that to some people at BioWare, and I said it too often. They're like, the dialogue wheel's not going anywhere. It's popular. I'm like, I disagree, but I understand, right? But there have been changes. Of course, there have been changes. Whether they are thematic changes, whether the real question comes down to, is a progressive game in 2014 gonna land the same as a progressive game in 2024? Probably not, right? There was a trans character in Inquisition, Krem, right? So the question is it a break from the continuum of the games, or therefore a change undeniably, or is it just a continuation of where Dragon Age has always been, which is super LGBTQ, sometimes to the point of excess and sometimes to the point of accidentally landing on giant homophobic stereotypes, like Sarah. Oh God. Anyway. But that can be a back and forth, but both sides have valid points, right? It's gonna be a much better conversation for everyone involved if you come into it going, I see where you're coming from. Can you try to see where I'm coming from? Can we find some points of agreement here? Right? I much prefer that, because to me, that's the purpose of conversations. Me understanding you, you understanding me. And the reason agree to disagree makes me go, is, you're cutting off that process by doing that. Like, no, I don't agree to disagree. I want to find a point of agreement. There's no, right? I want to find a legitimate point of agreement. And I think that is possible. Agreeing to disagree is just disagreeing with a nicey coat of paint. And whenever those things come up, let's move on is another one that, because people move on in their own time. Moving on is something that's a byproduct of processing. A person can't just force themselves to move on. Going, let's move on, is basically saying to somebody, I don't give a shit about your discomfort, deal. And that's probably not how people who use it intend it. Some do. But it's how it lands. And this isn't just my opinion. This is something I've heard from a lot of clients. So we do have to be aware of how our language either creates or facilitates conversations that seek a point of agreement, which is the purpose of debating fandom stuff. And then just, I don't know, insisting that your opinion, royal your opinion is validated at the expense of everyone else's opinion. Because that's zero sum, and that means more people are going to end up upset than not. And that's just not ideal, and it's not necessary. Like International Pancake Day isn't necessary, but we have it anyway, right? Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching, and be well.